Okay, thanks very much for coming, people, today, especially as it is very, very nice outside, and I'm sure you'd want to be somewhere else, but no. I don't want to be. No. I'm where I want to be. So I'd just like to extend a very, very Truth Seekers North East welcome to Andrew Johnson, and I'm just looking forward to this pop talk. So without further ado, I'll just hand it over.
Just to reiterate what Dave said, thanks very much for coming out on this warm afternoon. I think it's going to be a bit cooler tomorrow. I've got quite a lot of material, so I'm going to adopt quite a sort of broad and shallow approach rather than a narrow and deep. So you're going to have to hang on to your hats because I've got probably about 4 hours of material here, so I'm going to skip over quite a bit. And so I've got a bit of introductory video.
We are going to see more and more of these visitors from space, and that before too long the evidence will be incontrovertible, that you will have on your TV screens and on your movie screens concrete evidence that the ships are here and that they are real and they're not fantastic things which have been cooked up to make a movie.
We can say that the recent sightings are in no way connected with any secret development by any agency of the United States.
There's nothing to hide at all.
The expression flying saucers is a catch-all term for unusual lights appearing in the sky.
We've been able to explain them as hoaxes, as erroneously identified friendly aircraft, as meteorological or electronic phenomena, or as light aberrations.
None of the evidence that I have examined would indicate any proof at all that we are being visited by extraterrestrials.
There is absolutely no evidence.
We have not been hiding anything.
Personally, I'm convinced that there must be many, many higher civilizations in this enormous and incredibly ancient universe of ours.
So yeah, watch that film. I don't think it's on YouTube. You might find it on Netflix or something. Paul David's 1994 Roswell TV movie, excellent film. So, in case you don't know who I am, I currently work part-time as a tutor for the Open University. I'm not doing this in association with them or anything. They don't really care or know about, how much I've been involved in the sort of alternative knowledge scene now for the last sort of 15 years. I grew up in Skipton in North York, it's not ever so far from here, and I was born in Keighley. I went to Lancaster University, did a degree in computer science and physics there, worked in software engineering for about 20 years on and off. So basically I've been involved in a lot of analysis and fault finding work in software and development work as well. And then I began researching the UFO topic intensively in 2003 when I discovered Stephen Greer's Disclosure Project, which I've written quite a bit about in my acknowledged book. And then I set up the website, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, in 2005, and it's just developed from there. And this was one of the last pieces of sort of paid software development I did back in 2009 for Toshiba. And when my friend sent me this little bit of equipment, which was like a control module, I was surprised to see that it had a number on it of SA911. So that was a bit weird. So today we're going to say quite a lot of information, spanning sort of what's in 3 of my books. So we're going to look at UFOs and ET type stuff. We've got quite a few UFO related video clips, some of which I'll have to clip over. I'll mention a little bit about UFO and films, UFO and ETs in films and cinema. I've got a particularly interesting clip about that. And I've also got, you might have seen the skulls here, so I'm going to talk about this thing a little bit as well, but there's a whole other presentation on that which I recommend you go and look at. If we get time, I'm going to go into the crop circle phenomenon as well, because there's recently the picture that's on the cover of my book was reposted on Facebook, interestingly enough, but not in relation to my book, so I'm not quite sure why that was. but I think this this particular picture is and crop formation is very, very interesting, more interesting than most of the others, for reasons I'll try and explain. I'm also going to look at the way that prominent UFO researchers ignore evidence, and I'm going to look at the impact of the ignorance on the so-called disclosure process. Certain topics here, like for example the skull, very, very few researchers actually talk about, despite it being among the most compelling evidence of what surely must be alien life, having been here. So yeah, I've got 3 books that are sort of pulled bits on from this presentation. Secrets in the Solar System, which is anomalies in the solar system, all based on NASA data and ESA data and stuff. Finding the Secret Space Program, which is about anti-gravity technology development, and a bit, it's got 1 or 2 UFO cases in there as well. And then the one that I finished in about May this year is called Acknowledged, which is a perspective on matters of UFOs, aliens and crop circles. So in each book I look at evidence relating to the phenomena and how that evidence has been covered up and why people are probably not talking about it. It's a total of about 1,000 pages of information in those 3 books, something like that. So just to sort of dwell on, why do people come to these events? Why are you here? I'm not putting out a questionnaire, but why are you here? Why do you come to these events? Is it for entertainment? Is it because it interests you? Is it because you're unhappy with what you see in the mainstream? Are you curious? Is it a combination of these things? Or do you want to know the truth about things? And can you actually get to a point where you say, yeah, I know what the truth is about this particular thing now? Can you get to that point?
Everything apart from the entertainment, I would say.
Okay.
Cheap energy as well.
And just a point at the bottom, yeah, good point. Is it offensive in a community of truth seekers to say that you know the truth about something? Which is not so much in relation to some of this, yeah, in relation to some of this, but particularly with 9/11 research, some people seem to find it offensive that people like me say, yes, I know parts of what happened, and I know why they've covered it up, and I know how they've covered it up. So, again, following on this theme, I'm going to read out a quote here. Between the people and the government today lies a double standard of morality. Anything remotely scientific has become, by government definition, a matter of military security first, hence of secrecy. Something which does not breed security, but fear. If we see anything unusual, even in the skies, we the people must either freeze our lips like a Russian peasant at the sight of the commissar, or give our names, addresses, business connections and testimony to be screened and filtered by anonymous intelligence officers. Feared and respected by many people, these anonymous creatures can deny what we say, ridicule what we say, and sometimes, and in increasing number of countries, jail us for what we say, especially if our timing does not match to the second their intended official pronouncements on the subject. And I was just having a conversation in there with somebody, I won't say who it is, but I think it's sort of scarily applicable. And so anyone familiar with this quote, I'm guessing no, but this is where it comes from. Behind the Flying Saucers by Frank Scully, written in 1950. 1950. Almost 70 years ago. So I think he saw what was going on then, and it's got even worse since then. Okay, so I'm going to start off just by talking about a little bit about official investigations into the UFO phenomenon and why really, next to meaningless really, and will continue to be so. And then throughout this presentation I'm primarily going to use the term UFO, by which in most cases I really mean craft of extraterrestrial origin. This is the most commonly used term. It's most commonly used to mean craft of extraterrestrial origin, even though that's not what the abbreviation means. Of course the term means unidentified flying object, yes, and it was coined by Edward J. Ruppelt in 1952. So before that was the term flying saucers. The coining of this term itself includes the idea that the object cannot be properly characterised, when in some cases I think that is not applicable. You can characterise it as a craft of extraterrestrial origin, in some cases. And there have been several formal investigations that have already been done. There was Project Sign in 1948, Project Grudge, 1949 to the 1950s, Project Blue Book, which is the one that most people have heard of, and there's a new TV series of that name now, which is part of another psychological operation. And that ran in the 1950s and 1960s. And then there's the Condon Report, which was basically a total debunking attempt. And less well known in the 20th century is Project Saucer, and that was initiated by the US DoD in January 1948. So, and the report was published via Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, which is a name that comes up again and again if you study the literature on this subject. In addition, 2 sets of congressional hearings took place in the USA in 1966 and 1968. So yes, there have been officially paid for and sanctioned investigations in the US into this phenomenon, not so much in the UK. The other one that people are less familiar with is a more recent, and it's from France in 1999, and it's called the Cometa Report. It was never officially translated into English. You can get from my website and other places the English version. It's about 90 pages long, and the title was UFOs and Defence, What Must Be Prepared For. And yeah, said all that. So the study was carried out over several years by an independent group of former auditors at the Institute of Advanced Studies for National Defence, or IHEDN, and by qualified experts from various fields before its public release, and it was sent to French President Jacques Chirac, a name you probably remember, and to Prime Minister Lionel Jospin. In the conclusion it states, the extraterrestrial hypothesis is far from the best scientific hypothesis. It certainly has not been categorically proven, but the strong presumptions exist in its favour, and if it is correct, it is loaded with consequences, you bet. So they didn't, obviously they weren't committal, but again you can read the report. So, but what's been the result of the publication of these reports? I mean, the Cometa Report wasn't even translated into English. Has it changed the way that media operates in relation to the UFO ET issue? Did they change the way academia operates in relation to the issue in the universities and stuff? Has it changed the way that this subject is treated by professors and doctors and so forth in, say, physics, astronomy? When these reports came out, were they featured in programs which were, science programs? Well, that might have happened in the 1960s, but not in the last sort of 20 or 30 years that I'm aware of. So, this is Lord Peter Hill Norton, who did an investigation into the Rendlesham case, and he was a former, he was an admiral of the fleet. He was a top military guy in the UK, and he said in about 1999, this should be the subject of rigorous scientific investigation and not the subject of rubbishing by the tabloid newspapers. I've got some examples of that in my book, and how I tried to sort of get some serious attention put onto the Rendlesham story, and the guy just blew it off as a helicopter landing in the forest, without doing any investigation into that. But I don't think that Hill Norton realised the mechanisms of perception management and the control of certain information. It's just as effectively applied in the university environment, the academia, as it is in just about any organisation you can think of. So just in the media and in news reporting. And he also did not know of the defence applications that had been undertaken from the information they got from craft that crashed at Roswell and things like that. So I'm now going to review some of the cases and evidence that I've come across. I mean, you could spend weeks just doing this if you wanted, but I've just chosen a few cases which I think are significant. I covered some of them in the book. And let's just see if I can...
Possibly one of the most interesting aspects of the study of flying saucers, beyond the realization that they are real and extraterrestrial, is their philosophy. What manner of creatures build and fly them? What do they look like? How do they think? Are their ideas and ideals similar to ours? Could we understand them? All these and many other questions plague the serious investigator.
So this is Wilbert Smith, and that was recorded, I think, in 1958, 60 years ago. He was superintendent of radio regulations in Canada, and he held 37 patents when he died. His name does come up a little bit, but this guy started off as a skeptic of flying saucers. He didn't believe in them at first. After a few years of research, he came out with some extraordinary information, which was embodied, some of which was embodied in this 1950 top secret memo, which was found in the University of Ottawa archives by Nick Velasquez, and it was declassified in 1979. So it was discovered before the so-called, anybody that's heard of the MJ12 documents, this was before all of that, and it was written before that as well. And in the memo, Smith wrote, the matter about the flying saucer issue, the matter is the most highly classified subject in the United States government, rating higher than the H-bomb. Flying saucers exist, their modus operandi is unknown, but concentrated effort is being made by a small group headed by Dr. Vannevar Bush, and the entire matter is considered by the United States to be of tremendous significance. 1950. I was further informed that the United States authorities are investigating along quite a number of lines which might possibly be related to the saucers, such as mental phenomena. Mental phenomena. What does that mean? And I gather that they are not doing too well, since they indicated that if Canada is doing anything at all in geomagnetics, they would welcome a discussion with suitably accredited Canadians. So Smith's talking about the craft that they'd found having something to do with mental phenomena, which is basically to do with thought control. This is in 1950. Now in Ryan Wood's book, Magic Eyes Only, about UFO crashes, it reproduces the Special Operations Manual part of it. And it says, so what I'm trying to show you here is something which corroborates this part of what's in Smith's memo. All information relating to MJ12 has been classified Magic Eyes Only and carries a security level 2 points above that of top secret. So we've seen the same thing as what was written in Smith's memo in a different document. The reason for this has to do with the consequences that may arise not only from the impact upon the public should the existence of such matters become general knowledge, but also the danger having such advanced technology has been recovered by the Air Force fall into the hands of unfriendly foreign powers. No information is released to the public press, and the official government position is that no special group such as MJ12 exists. So this is what Wilbert Smith was told by Robert Sarbacher, essentially. So had Sarbacher, Sarbacher is another researcher, I've got another slide from him in a minute, had Sarbacher seen this document, the Special Operations Manual, and again you can get that online, that Special Operations Manual, it's quite interesting. It talks about the recovery of extraterrestrial material.
Hello? Dr. Sarbacher? Yes? Hi, Stan Friedman up in Fredericton, New Brunswick, Canada. Oh, for heaven's sake. Let's see, early 50s. Now, the notes that I sent you from Wilbert Smith, do you remember? You do remember talking to him? Yeah, vaguely. The Canadian? Yeah, vaguely. Okay, his notes were 1950, and let me see the exact date. September 15th were his notes, 1950. He asked you a question that you didn't answer at that time, which was rather fascinating. Maybe you've just given me the answer in a sense. He quotes you as saying, yes, it is classified 2 points higher even than the H-bomb. In fact, the most highly classified subject in U.S. government at the present time. And that was the greatest idea. Why? Well, it seems silly to me. Well, his next comment, that was supposedly what you said, and then his next comment was, may I ask the reason for the classification? And you said, you may ask, but I can't tell you. Do you think that? Because I didn't know. Oh, okay, not because of this crash. You see, there's no mention of a crash per se in this note. Do you think it could have happened after this? I don't know. There may have been several of them. There was some talk that there were. Huh?
So I know that wasn't very clear, but that was Sarbacher recorded in 1983, confirming that he gave that information to Wilbert Smith, and he's talking about crashes. He had knowledge of crashes. So Sarbacher, I know there's a lot of text on this slide, which I'll try and summarise. Sarbacher, basically, he was a very well-respected scientist in the 1940s and 50s, and he had built a quite advanced lab You know, he's sort of like Robert Oppenheimer type of scientist. Oppenheimer was one of the scientists that worked on the H-bomb. And what he was actually doing, according to his son, was he was tasked with putting a camera on a missile. So the US Air Force had these missiles they were firing off, and they wanted to put cameras on them, because the missile was the only thing that they had that was fast enough that had a chance of catching up to a flying saucer. Sarbacher was asked if he could set up a project where he could put a camera on the missiles. That's what his son said. So they wanted to track the UFOs. This was the Air Force back in the sort of 50s. So yeah, so Sarbacher, you know, he knew about the secret research by the Air Force into the UFO issue. Now, Smith died at the age of 52 from cancer of the lower bowel. You may read that he died of brain cancer. That's not true. And he told his family that they would try and come and get his files. So what happened was the files were kept in secret by his wife Merle, and eventually passed to another chap called Arthur Bray in Ottawa, and then that eventually was passed on to Grant Cameron, who ran a website which I'll mention later on. So what Smith did, and again I'm skipping over this quite quickly, but over several years he got in touch with the boys topside, he called them. He didn't call them aliens, he didn't call them ETs or extraterrestrials. He called them boys topside, he called them people from outside. And he was given instructions how to build 3 bits of hardware: a binding meter, a caduceus coil, and a magnetic sync circuit which extracts energy from the Earth's magnetic field. And he also built an anti-gravity experiment, which I've written about in the Secret Space Program book. And he set up a saucer detection station at Shirley Bay in Canada in 1954. And they did detect something in August of 1954, and the project was shut down the next day, or 2 days later. So Smith knew a lot of stuff.
As far as I know, our group in Ottawa are the only group that has actually taken the information which was given to us by the boys topside and translated it into hardware that works. Much information has been given to us through various channels, but people just talk about it. They don't do anything about it. I think that is deplorable. I think when they give us information, the least we can do is to show our good faith by trying at least to convert that information into hardware. We have built 2 items of hardware on their instructions that I'm rather proud of.
So that's where he starts talking about the coil. So that's just Smith talking in 1958 about the things that he built. The binding meter was to measure binding forces in the environment, and he'd sort of got involved in investigating air crashes because there were some aircraft that seemed to have come apart in mid-air, and Smith suspected it was something to do with binding forces, which is it's a concept that's not really recognised in current physics, and I won't go into it now, but I think he was right. And Smith actually said that they were sent bits of hardware from the US that had come off craft that had been shot at or crash landed or broken up in some way. And Wilbert Smith's son, Jim Smith, I'm going to skip over some of these clips. He talks about how he handles some of these pieces from the craft that have been sent to Wilbert Smith to analyse. So they know stuff. They know a lot of stuff. It's not about lights in the sky. Smith also told his son, we were told about the bodies that Wilbert Smith had seen when he was personally invited by the US military. We were simply told that he saw the bodies, and from the impression that I received, it was only for a short time, minutes not hours. Mr. Smith, and this is when they had a meeting at the Montreal Flying Saucer Club, which was the group that Smith ran. I think it continued for a few years after Smith's death. Mr. Smith described to his wife the dead occupants having been approximately 4.5 to 5 feet in height, greyish-blue tint to the skin, large eyes, small slit for a mouth, 4 long fingers with no thumbs. And his son Jim Smith, in an interview in about 2004 or 2005, I've got a clip here, but the audio is pretty poor actually, it's low quality. But he basically confirms that when his father was on his deathbed, he told his son, yeah, I saw the bodies, they were aliens. And that was confirmed by Jim Smith in about 2004. Now Smith became so sure of what he found that he realised towards the end of his life, I think this is 1958, he basically says, well, there's no point in investigating now. I know what's going on with this group. These guys have come to the Earth, they've given me information, I've built stuff, I've corresponded with people, other people have seen ships landing, aliens getting out. It's all real, it's all true. So, and he said, well, what's the point in investigating? You know, I know this much now. He said, there's no point in ploughing and reploughing the same field. And that's how I feel. That's how I feel. You know, I know certain stuff now is true, as far as I'm concerned, which I'm going to go on to. And Smith felt the same. And he'd been investigating this probably for about 8 or 9 years by this point. He's a clever guy. Let's see.
In 1965, Gordon Cooper was the last American astronaut to go up into space alone.
What they think on it. Now the action that I have taken is to turn off my 05G switch gears and my...
He orbited the planet 22 times.
I think that those of you that know me know that I've always spoken honestly and straightforward to you. I intend to do so today.
10 years earlier, while stationed at Edwards Air Force Base, Cooper witnessed an event that has yet to be explained nearly 50 years later. He was supervising the filming of a precision landing facility for F-86 fighter jets. Suddenly, a saucer-like craft flew directly over the cameraman. 3 landing gear apparatus opened, and the object landed on the dry lake bed.
They're just typical saucer shape, double lenticular shape, metallic. And they went out, picked up their cameras and moved on out toward him filming. And he lifted off, put the gear back in the well, and climbed out at a very high rate of speed and disappeared.
Cooper had the film footage of the strange craft developed. By the time it returned from processing, he had gone up through the ranks to report the incident.
Finally, with the colonel telling me to, you know, when the film arrived at my desk, to put it in the carrier pouch. There would be a courier there at my office by that time already, and they'd arranged for him to fly in our base airplane back to Washington with these films.
Did you watch the film?
We didn't have a chance to run it. I had a chance to hold it up to the window and look at it. It was certainly a good film.
After the developed film was sent by plane to Washington, it was never seen or heard of again.
Did you ever keep in touch with anybody about it or discuss it?
How would I keep in touch with anybody about it? There's no way within the military or within the government of keeping track of something that is classified unless you're directly involved in it, and I was not.
It's pretty clear to me. Flying saucer lands at Edwards Air Force Base, Cooper's team films it, and it's never seen again. I mean, what is it that's possibly be misinterpreted about that? Yeah, you don't get that story. I think was on a couple of programs about 10 years ago. That documentary was called Out of the Blue. There's several versions on YouTube. I think they've done like an edited director's cut and things like that. One of the best documentaries on the subject if you've got 90 minutes. Out of the Blue by James Fox. On YouTube, watch that, and there's some pretty compelling information. I've probably got one or two other bits and bobs from that in here as well. So yeah, so we've got flying saucer landed, we know that they've either been shot at or they've crashed. What about aliens? Well, this is, to me, is one of the most compelling cases.
Just after sunset on the evening of November 5th, 1975, a 7-man crew was piling into a 4-wheel drive vehicle after finishing a day of woodcutting near the tiny northern Arizona community of Snowflake. One of the 7 men was Travis Walton, whose curiosity that night plunged him into a living nightmare he would never forget. Just before leaving the work area, the men in the Jeep watched a glowing object emerge from behind the trees. Travis opened a door to get a better view and continued watching, stunned with his companions.
The thing was about 90 feet away, about 20 feet in diameter, about 8 feet high. It was glowing a golden color, kind of like molten metal. I couldn't hear anything at first. It must have been because when I got closer I could hear it, but it was a high-pitched, intermittent sound and a low rumbling sound. It sounded like machinery or, a heavy mechanical sound. Very difficult to describe.
Travis got out of the vehicle and moved toward the object, despite cries from his friends for him to return. Walton assumed by the time he could get any closer, the object would be gone.
Just as I got up close, it started to move with a sort of a rocking motion, kind of like a spinning top, like when it's slowing down to fall over, except it wasn't spinning. The same side stayed toward me. And when it started to move, it got real loud, and that really scared me. And I jumped down behind a log, and I looked up at this thing, and I decided then I was in a lot of danger, and I was going to get the heck out of there. And I raised up to go. It's the last thing I remember. I raised up and I started to turn, and I was just about in a high crouch when wham, I felt a numbing shock hit me. It kind of like in the head, and I went out. I was knocked unconscious.
His 6 co-workers, however, saw what Travis had not. A slender beam of intense light which shot from the craft and lifted Walton off his feet, knocking him to the ground. The rest of the crew sped away in panic, looking back to see the craft take off. But when they returned to see if Travis was all right, he was nowhere to be found. When Travis finally came to, he was weak, groggy, and in pain. Above him was a light. He assumed he was in a hospital bed, but as his blurred vision became clearer, he discovered he was wrong.
I felt something pressing on my chest. My shirt and my jacket pushed up, and there was this thing laying across it. It was about 4 or 5 inches thick. The thing extended down over my rib cage and down to my belt. And when I looked up and I saw this thing, it was gray. And I looked past the edge of it, and I saw something white. My eyes weren't focusing real good, and at first I thought it was a doctor, white mask and cap. But when I got to where I could see, I saw this thing, and I just came unglued. I looked around me, and there was 3 of them. I just panicked. I became hysterical.
As his eyes became accustomed to the surroundings, Travis saw his captors in more detail.
They were about 4 feet 10. Had very large heads. No hair on their heads. No eyebrows. No whiskers or anything like that. They had very large eyes. Those eyes are something that really bothered me worse than anything. The rest of their features were small. It was like small ears, small nose, small mouth, hardly any lips if they had any lips. I never saw them open their mouth. But they were wearing a long coverall type things. They were orangish tan. When I saw them, I struck out. I wasn't really a blow. I was so weak. I pushed this one on my right, and he fell back into another one. They felt kind of marshmallowy, kind of like fat, Whereas, when you push against somebody with muscle, it feels differently. But they seemed light, unexpectedly. And I jumped off the table there and staggered over into the corner. There was a bench across the wall, and I leaned there. And I was really weak, and I was so scared, I was shaking, and they started towards me. And I started just screaming at them, telling them to keep away from me. And I reached over and I grabbed a thing off of the table. There was a bunch of things there, and there was a clear tube about maybe 1 inch in diameter, I don't know, 1.5 feet long. And I thought, it wasn't heavy like glass, and it was too light for a club, and so I wanted to defend myself, and so I hit it against the table to break it, maybe get a sharp point, but it didn't break. But I lashed out at them with it, and I kept screaming. They only took a couple of steps, and they stopped.
After the creatures departed, Travis left the room through the same door, but went down the hallway in the opposite direction.
I came to a doorway on my right, and I went into this. I didn't go right in. I looked in, and it was a round room, a domed room, with a chair in the middle. And it was really funny about this room. It's really strange. It looked like, you know, I could see the walls and everything, the same as everything else in that place. It was all just this matte gray metal look. But when I went towards the chair, I didn't go towards the chair right away. I walked around towards the side because the chair was high backed, and I was afraid that there might be one of those things sitting in that chair. So I went around there, and when I could see that there was nobody in the chair, I walked over to it. But the closer I got to the chair, the darker the room seemed. And I could start seeing points of light, like the stars. There was buttons there. You know, I did a stupid thing. I pushed some, you know, hoping to open the door or something. But when that didn't work, well, I got scared of doing that too, because it made the stars move. I turned, and there was a man standing in the doorway I came through. And this guy, I mean, he appeared human to me, you know, which was a big relief. And I ran up there and started asking him all kinds of questions. And he just smiled, kind of tolerant-like. And I assumed that maybe he couldn't hear me because he had the helmet on his head, a clear helmet. And so when he motioned for me, and he took me by the arm, I went with him. I assumed I was being rescued.
Travis was led out of the craft and into a large hangar where more human-like figures were present. He remembers their appearance this way.
They'd pass, you know, on the street, but they had a strange thing to their eyes. They were a light color, a golden hazel, you know, and they had a resemblance to each other, like a family, but not identical. There was one of them that was a woman, I could tell. Had longer hair and female shape. One of the men and the woman came over there, and they put me on the table, and they put a mask over my face, and I started to resist, and they held me on the table, and they put this mask on my face, and I reached up to pull it away, and before I could, everything went black.
Meanwhile, the other members of the woodcutting crew had reported Walton missing. Local police organized the search party, but no trace of Walton was found. The next thing he remembered, Travis was lying on the side of a road outside Heber, Arizona, 12 miles from Snowflake.
When I first regained consciousness, I was laying on the roadway, well, to the side of the road, more off than on. And my head was on my arm, and I saw a light, and I looked up in time to see it go off, which I think was either a light going off or a hatch closing, perhaps. Then I saw this object hovering there. It was a flattened sphere. I mean, it was shaped like a disc, but it was very shiny, chrome-like. I could see that reflecting everything around there, but not giving off any light. It was dark. And it was just there for a second, hovering about 4 feet off the ground, and then it just shot straight up. It was incredible how quick, without making a sound.
Travis staggered to a phone booth to call his family, who at first did not believe it was really him. But once convinced, they came to take him home. On the way, Travis received yet another shock.
We were riding back in, and they said something about everybody being worried about me. I can't remember the exact conversation, but I said, well, you know, it must have been a bad couple of hours or something, to reference the time or something like that. And they said, Travis, you've been gone for 5 days.
While recuperating, Travis was able to remember most of what had happened to him. A series of hypnotic regressions with Dr. James Harder from the University of California, however, enabled Walton to recall things with less anxiety and more detail.
That's a very well-known story. Some of you in the room are probably familiar with it, but Travis has told the same story since 1975, when it happened, November the 5th. I met him in 2016 with a photo of he and I in the book. So that really happened, and I have no reason to doubt that Travis was taken up into the craft and he was helped by the aliens to recover. But this is how they put it into the Hollywood movie, with him being taken by the aliens, dragged by the feet through the ship, and having things stuck in him and this rubber sheet put over him so he couldn't breathe. That's the Hollywood version of this account. That's the Hollywood version from 1993. Wonder why that would be. Okay, so are we getting subliminal disclosure? A lot of people suggest this, that we are being told, you know, the sorts of things I'm telling you in films and songs and things, and I've got a couple of examples I'd like to just mention here. Anyone know who the first abductee was? UFO abductee? Somebody pointed this out to me a few years ago.
Oh, that wasn't a bit nice. You have made me very angry.
What infantile minds? How Buck Rogers can you get? Hey, Mac, I don't like to seem ungrateful, but this jacket just ain't my size.
I know it's funny and everything, but there might be more serious side to it as well. And you know, we've all probably seen, I would say, these sorts of films, and particularly it started up in the 50s, which of course came after the Roswell incident and all the various flying saucer flaps. Generally, you get the aliens are considered to be evil. But I think in 1977 we had a bit of a different film that you might remember seeing, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, which I hadn't done a lot of research into that, except to say that the ending might be based on a real event where they play in all the tones and they have communication. I've got a little bit about that in the book, but there's another bit which I think is a more interesting thing, which I've got another clip for now. In 2009, Grant Cameron reported that it had been confirmed that after a private showing in the White House, Ronald Reagan leaned over, clapped Spielberg on the shoulder, and quietly commented, "You know, there aren't 6 people in this room who know how true this really is," as in the story of extraterrestrial film. And this was seemingly also said in 1989 by Bill Cooper.
The next really important occurrence was the fact that in 1949, again near Roswell, 2 discs crashed. They recovered 5 alien bodies from these discs. They scoured the area by foot patrol, by jeep patrol, and by aircraft reconnaissance and discovered an alien live from the crash, wandering in the desert. They captured him. He was designated EB, Extraterrestrial Biological Entity. EB was taken to Los Alamos, where he was placed in a Faraday-shielded environment because he had the ability to read the thoughts and transmit thoughts to people outside of where he was being held captive. The next most important thing that happened after they found EB, it came a few years later. EB became ill and they tried to save him. They were unsuccessful. They didn't know how to go about it. But in an attempt to save him, and also in an attempt to gain favor with this technologically superior race, they began broadcasting out into space for help. We have one of your people here who crashed in one of your ships. We're trying to save his life. He's dying. Please help us save his life. By doing that, they hoped, number 1, to make contact, number 2, to make friendly contact, number 3, that the aliens would see us as a benevolent people trying to help one of theirs and would not attempt to destroy us or hurt us. EB died in June of 1952. As of the time of EB's death, we had not had any answer to the message that we had sent out into space. The movie that you saw, called E.T., is the story of EB. They have changed some things around to make it more palatable to you. The beginning of the story, he's running around in the desert. He's lost. The government is chasing him. In the real story, the government caught him. In the movie, the little boy gets him. And they form this symbiotic relationship. They're each getting something from the other. And it's a wonderful story. Well, in real life, the real life E.B. was assigned an Air Force officer to watch over him, become his friend, get as much information from him as he could, be his mentor, be his captor. And the same symbiotic relationship developed between E.B. and this Air Force officer, to the point where when E.B. died, the Air Force officer cried. He was deeply hurt. He'd lost a dear friend, because he had been with E.B. literally night and day since they had found him. In the movie, E.B. gets very ill, and everybody's very concerned. And the little boy plays the role of the Air Force officer. And you see that he cries. But in the film, he lives. E.T. Call Home was Project Sigma, to attempt to make communications with the aliens to come and help save the life of E.B.
I was there.
You were there? Okay, so is it... The story that I heard was that when Reagan saw it, he started talking about how close to reality it was, and he was quickly ushered out of the room. Is that true?
No, he wasn't ushered out of the room. He was the President of the United States. Nobody could usher Ronald Reagan out of the room. It was in the White House screening room.
Yeah.
And Reagan got up to thank me for bringing the film to show him, to show the President, the First Lady, and all of their guests, which included Sandra Day O'Connor in her first week as a justice in the Supreme Court, and it included some astronauts. I think Neil Armstrong was there. I'm not 100% certain, but it was an amazing evening, and he just stood up and he looked around the room almost like he was doing a head count, and he said, "I want to thank you for bringing E.T. to the White House. We really enjoyed your movie." And then he looked around the room and he said, "And there are a number of people in this room who know that everything on that screen is absolutely true." And he said it without smiling. But he said that, and everybody laughed. By the way, the whole room laughed because he presented it like a joke, but he wasn't smiling as he said it.
Yeah.
There you are. Maybe the U.S. government know a lot more than they're letting on. A lot more. And then you get things like this. The Fire in the Sky, I've mentioned that. They changed Walton's abduction experience. You can see that for yourselves if you go and watch that film and listen to what Walton said. This film that came out in '97, Contact, that again seemed to introduce some other concepts like consciousness and dimensional travel, which also comes into this topic if you read across the sort of literature. We had things like Independence Day, which had perhaps a different angle on it, which again, I think I've got another clip of, which I might play. But Contact, interestingly enough, was Carl Sagan's only novel. All the other books he wrote were, factual books. And I've got some information on Carl Sagan in my Finding the Secret Space Program book. Carl Sagan was actually involved in a project in 1959 to actually set a nuclear bomb off on the moon. So he must have had a top secret clearance in 1959. There's a document that you can find which was released about 2 or 3 years ago with his name on it. I've got a copy of that in the book. So Sagan, he knew a lot more than what he put in his Cosmos series, and I've got a bit more about Sagan in my books. Another sort of short set of clips here. Do you think these people are going to disclose?
Perhaps we need some outside universal threat. I occasionally think how quickly our differences worldwide would vanish if we were facing an alien threat from outside this world. And yet, I ask you, is not an alien force already among us? What could be more alien to the universal aspirations of our peoples than war and the threat of war?
And your children.
I couldn't help at one point in my discussions privately with General Secretary Gorbachev, when you stop to think that we're all God's children wherever we may live in the world, I couldn't help but say to him, just think how easy his task and mine might be in these meetings that we held if suddenly there was a threat to this world from some other species, from another planet, outside in the universe. We'd forget all the little local differences that we have between our countries, and we would find out once and for all that we really are all human beings here on this earth together.
I got a letter from 13-year-old Ryan from Belfast. Now, Ryan, if you're out in the crowd tonight, here's the answer to your question. No. As far as I know, an alien spacecraft did not crash in Roswell, New Mexico in 1947. And Ryan, if the United States Air Force did recover alien bodies, they didn't tell me about it either, and I want to know.
The godmother of your daughter, Shirley MacLaine, writes in her new book that you sighted a UFO over her home in Washington State. Did you see a UFO?
I did, and the rest of the account, it was unidentified flying object, okay? It's like, it's unidentified. I saw something.
You know, also at this debate earlier this week, there was a bit of a humorous moment when Congressman Dennis Kucinich said that he had seen a UFO, but that's something that you're intimately familiar with yourself.
Well, a UFO is an unidentified flying object, and when I was back as a peanut farmer and the head of a Lions clubs in the southwest Georgia, I and about 25 others saw something in the air that changed colors and was round and came and left. We couldn't figure out what it was. It was unidentified as far as we were concerned, but I think it's impossible, in my opinion, some people disagree, to have space people from other planets or other stars to come in this say. I don't think that's possible.
Well, it's certainly proof, though, Mr. President, that you can see a UFO and go on to become president of the United States, so maybe it's not over for Congressman Kucinich yet.
Hello, we're back. Manny Pacquiao's on the way. President Bill Clinton is here with us, so if I was president, and I won't be, let's be honest, the first thing I would do after putting my hand on that Bible and taking that oath to serve the country is I wouldn't even probably finish the oath. I would run to the White House. I'd demand to see all the classified files on the UFOs. Because I want to know. I'd want to know what has been going on. Did you do that?
Sort of.
Sort of.
Yeah, we had, I think it was at the beginning of my second term, we had the anniversary of Roswell.
You waited that long?
I did.
Wow.
Well, I didn't. And then there's also Area 51. You remember there was a great sci-fi movie where there was an alien kept deep under the ground in Area 51? So first I had people go look at the records on Area 51 to make sure there was no alien down there. And people thought that because everybody who works there has to stop about an hour away and put on special clothing and then drive in and out. And that's because a lot of our stealth technology is made there. We know that now, but there are no aliens there. So then when the Roswell thing came up, I knew we'd get, gazillions of letters. So I had all the Roswell papers reviewed, everything.
If you saw that there were aliens there, would you tell us?
Yeah.
You would?
I would. Well, I think, look, what do we know? We know now we live in an ever-expanding universe. We know that there are billions of stars and planets literally out there, and the universe is getting bigger. We know from our fancy telescopes that just in the last 2 years, more than 20 planets have been identified outside our solar system that seem to be far enough away from their suns and dense enough that they might be able to support some form of life. So it makes it increasingly less likely that we're alone.
Oh, you're trying to give me a hint that there are aliens.
No, I'm trying to tell you I don't know.
Oh.
But if we were visited someday, I wouldn't be surprised. I just hope that it's not like Independence Day.
Yeah, right.
That it's a conflict.
Well, now we have friendly
Maybe the only way to unite this incredibly divided world of ours. They're out there. We better think of how all the differences among people on Earth would seem small if we felt threatened by a space invader. That's the whole theory of independence.
You're right. You're right.
Everybody gets together and makes nice, and you know.
You and Bill O'Reilly would be hiding in a bunker together.
Oh, Bill O'Reilly, he'd every mean thing he ever said about me. That's the thing. I don't care. Look at that.
This is something I feel like, if I was the president, and it's unlikely that that is ever going to happen.
You never know.
If I was the president...
It was unlikely that I was going to be president.
The moment I was inaugurated, my hand would just, it'd still be hot from touching the Bible, and I would immediately race to wherever they have the files about Area 51 and the UFOs, and I'd go through everything to find out what happened.
Right.
Did you do that?
That's why you will not be president. Because that's the first thing that you would do.
It's at
the aliens won't let it happen. You reveal all their secrets. They exercise strict control over us.
Now, you know, there are a lot of people that are going to examine your facial expressions here, every twitch, everything, and say, and of course, so did you look? Did you see? Did you explore?
I can't reveal anything.
Oh, really? Because President Clinton said he did go right in, and he did check, and there was nothing.
Well, you know, that's what we're instructed to say.
All right.
That's right.
When we had your husband, President Clinton, on this show, he said, I asked him about UFOs in Area 51, and if he looked in, because if I was president, that's the first thing I do. I go right into those files and see what was going on.
Right.
And he said that he did do that.
Yes.
And that he didn't find anything.
Well, I'm gonna do it again.
Yeah, why not?
Right? And you know, there's a new name. It's unexplained aerial phenomenon.
Unexplained aerial phenomenon,
Yep,
really?
Yep, UAP. That's the latest nomenclature.
I like the old one. I like UFO. I don't know why.
Well, I think we can use them interchangeably, but I would like us to go into those files and hopefully make as much of that public as possible. If there's nothing there, let's tell people there's nothing there.
What if there is something there?
Well, if there is something there, unless it's a threat to national security, I think we ought to share it with the public.
Well, what if everybody's all hopped up on medical marijuana and everybody gets paranoid? I would love it.
That's why I want more research.
If you share it with me, I'll decide what is the best course of action. I really have my ear to the ground.
Well, you know, I'm more than happy to do that.
So that, you know, you might think it's funny, but that's perception management. Here's the guy, Jimmy Kimmel. He's a comic. They make light of it. They make a joke out of it. They're not really giving you any information. For those that have not looked at Bill and Hillary Clinton, I suggest you put into a search engine, tainted blood from Clinton. Barry Soetoro is probably Barack Obama's real name. If you look at the investigation by Sheriff Arpaio, it shows that Barack Obama's birth certificate was probably a fake. So you should never have been president. And even if it's genuine, I mean, it's like the birth certificate is in Hawaii. It's not in the sort of mainland US. So, I mean, you know, and he's going on about, oh, that's what the aliens told us to say. Just makes a complete joke out of it. And when you saw Clinton at Belfast reading out the letter from Ryan, going to research on Grant Cameron's website, Ryan didn't exist. There was no Ryan. So why was Clinton trying to get that into his speech? Okay, so I think, I think we'll probably have a break now, because we're at 15:15, and then I'll probably do one more film clip that's about a minute long, and then we'll do that after the break, though, I think so.
Brilliant.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you, Andrew.